facts, which at first seem improbable, will, even on scant explanation, drop the cloak which has hidden them and stand forth in naked and simple beauty.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
Oh yeah, baby. Galileo.
Matt, I don't think I've ever wanted to be in a band more than called Drop the Cloak.
Drop the Cloak.
I mean, come on. Imagine how many girls would be in the front row of a Drop the Cloak gig. Just saying.
Yeah.
Matt, what can you say about Galileo, hey?
What can't we say about Galileo? Do you know what? I'm going to make an apology before we just go in. This unfortunately this episode's going to go out a day late. So sorry. Oh. I forgot my laptop, Jamie, and so I can't edit the podcast until I get home.
Matt, don't say it like that. People think that I've never edited.
Yeah, let's keep that a secret from the listeners.
Guys, we hope it was worth it. So we've got a good show today, haven't we, Matt?
Oh my God, it's all about Galileo.
It is, and we've got a special interview later, haven't we?
Our monthly catch-up with David Baker.
The one and only DB.
Or David Baker.
Papa DB, as I call him.
Are we?
Hey, Matt, well, we've got to start with a congratulations, haven't we? To get your glasses charged because it's to SpaceX.
Again, yes, they've been smashing it this week. Bit of a weird ending, though. But
yeah,
hey,
didn't do the land properly, but
let's take their two flights this week. So, yes, it's the Falcon 9 flew a first stage for the third time. So it's been in and out of space 3 times now and managed to land that one. So that's the 32nd landing of a first stage, becoming boring, huh?
Just ridiculous.
Well, just when we thought it was becoming boring, then the next time they go up, unfortunately, they didn't nail the landing, but there's quite a few tweets coming in this morning about how it's the most elegant failure of all time.
Yeah,
so
that works. Yeah, it was quite graceful in its fault.
Yeah, so apparently a grid fin didn't deploy properly, and so the booster ended up spinning out of control. But still, it came in for a kind of proper landing. It managed to control its spin at the last second and gracefully plop into the sea, where it fell over
like a cosmic ballerina,
lowering herself into a bath.
Or himself, Matt.
I like to think of SpaceX boosters as female, though. If they're male, it all starts to get a little bit too phallic for me. For my humble tastes.
Oh, dear.
So, yes, Elon Musk said the grid fin hydraulic pump had stalled and that there is no redundancy for that particular part, and they're probably thinking about adding a bit of redundancy now.
Oh, I think they should. Well, congrats, guys. That's you're smashing it.
Smashing it. Another congrats to NASA, because of OSIRIS-REx has indeed reached the asteroid Bennu. Massive congratulations to Ariane 5, 6th launch of the year, which has delivered the Indian GSAT-11 finally into the planned orbits, and it was a special orbit. Took extra special strength from the Ariane 5 to hoist up 2 satellites, mega heavy payload up into geostationary orbit. And of course the Indian satellite, I spoke to Gurbir Singh yesterday.
I was going to say, you had a good interview, didn't you?
Yeah. We've got a brilliant Indian space special coming up soon. Might have to be a 2-parter, a bit of an Alan Bond style chat.
Oh, class. Well, tune in for that.
We haven't talked about them. We really should, and I was supposed to with David, but we ran out of time. The CLIPS contracts that have gone out to US companies to build the lander to go.
And this is the Commercial Lunar Payload Services.
Yeah,
CLIPS.
So, CLIPS to go down from the Gateway down to the Moon and eventually Mars. Mm-hmm. And we should also say, whoop, the Soyuz managed to carry Anne McClain, David St. Jacques, and of course Oleg Gunonenko of Roscosmos up onto the International Space Station. It all went to plan.
Lots of congratulations.
Jamie?
Yeah?
Do you remember Podcast 85?
I do.
Do you remember Simon, spelt Cimon?
I remember laughing about it at the time.
Yeah, the Crew interactive mobile companion. Well, they switched it on, I think, last week. And there's a great video of Alexander Gerst sort of interacting with it. Very
How's
similar.
It getting on?
Well, it was very similar to the missus's interaction with Alexa, really.
Yeah.
It's always very it's pretty stilted, isn't it? Conversations with AIs at the moment.
Yeah, it's not a flowing conversation.
Check out that video of Alexander Gerst.
Check that out.
He almost gets stroppy with Alexander Gerst for not liking
it is
music.
Getting real. It is getting human.
It's like,
so
don't
Matt,
you like my music? Yes.
Who is our space legend of the week?
Well, we gave it away, didn't we, with our quote?
We did.
Galileo Galilei.
It's the one and only Galileo. So Matt, where was he born?
Pizza in
Isn't
Italy.
Isn't it pronounced Pisa, Matt?
Pisa, yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't born in a pizza. That would be weird.
Considered the father of observational astronomy.
Father of science. So he's Stephen Hawking and Einstein's favourite scientist. I don't know how you get a bigger endorsement than that.
Well, don't forget that he was also a great inventor.
Mm-hmm. Telescopes.
Yeah.
Military compasses.
Yeah, please don't forget that.
And even a thermometer.
Really?
Yeah.
Bloody hell, Galileo.
Yeah. No, the thing is, actually, Galileo is I know this is ridiculous, but Galileo is loads better than I thought.
Well, this is what we're here to learn. So, yeah, Matt.
I wonder if it's because we're British and it's all Isaac Newton this, Isaac Newton that. And
It
really,
could be.
maybe Galileo's under Isaac Newton's shadow, when in the rest of the world, Isaac Newton's under Galileo's shadow.
It's the other way around, possibly. Well, let's
Yeah.
have a look into it. So, yeah, born 15th of February, 1564, and died 8th of January, 1642.
He wanted to become a priest.
He did originally.
Then he wanted to become a doctor. Then he became an art teacher.
I like that. I'd love to see some of his art.
And then he thought, do you know what? Maths is really my bag.
He's pretty good at it.
And then he got into telescopes. He saw some Dutch spectacles maker who'd made a spyglass that was used to observe ships. And Galileo thought, do you know what? I can make something better than this. And he was the first person that kind of really thought about looking at the stars with it. Or was he?
I mean, Matt, you've got to look at 1610. This is a big year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He made observations of 4 objects surrounding Jupiter that behaved unlike stars. These turned out to be Jupiter's 4 largest satellite moons, which, of course, as you know,
as we talked about last week,
Io, Callisto, Europa, and Ganymede. They were later renamed the Galilean satellites in honour of the man himself.
But get this, the Istituto e Museo di Storia della Scienza in Italy actually has 2 of his telescopes that were hand-built by Galileo.
Whoa.
Which
That is shrine.
ridiculous. But you know, I was mentioning, was he the first person to point a telescope at the sky? Turns out there was an English dude called Thomas Harriot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, who apparently did observe the moon through a telescope first. But unlike Galileo, he didn't actually make any kind of really kind of conclusions from it. He sort of just looked at it.
Was like, oh, look at that.
Look at that. Didn't know what it was. Whereas Galileo used his genius brain to kind of work out what all these lines and dots were on the moon, and he worked out that they were mountains and craters and things like that, and which is phenomenal. Of course,
that's mind blowing.
Highly controversial at the time. Everyone was going, "You're mad," because of course the Roman Catholic Church was so powerful at that point.
Of course.
And so much
we
so.
can't be orbiting anything. Everything's orbiting us, or we will burn you at the stake, witch.
So Galileo eventually started, really pushing for this geocentric model of the universe. However, the Roman Catholic Church were not happy, so put him under house arrest eventually. And it took until 1992 for the Roman Catholic Church to apologise.
It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
But Galileo did get some things wrong. He refused to believe Kepler's theory that the moon caused tides, and he so wanted to get sort of evidence for geocentric model of the universe that he kind of, I think he wanted to sort of say that the Earth's sort of movement around the sun was causing the oceans to slosh about.
Yes.
But it could only explain one tide a day rather than two tides a day. But, so he sometimes got things wrong. But he looked at the Milky Way. I didn't realise he looked at the Milky Way, and up to that point, everyone just thought it was like, well, a milky kind of streak across the sky. And he was the first person to realise, no, it's actually just billions of stars packed so densely that they appear to be clouds from Earth.
Matt, 2 years after he'd spotted the moons of Jupiter, he observed Neptune.
Yeah, this is incredible.
It appears in his notebooks as one of many unremarkable dim stars. He didn't realise that it was a planet, but he did know its motion relative to the stars before he lost track of it. But, I mean, we have to keep looking back at the dates here. 1612.
1612, yeah. Seeing Neptune. That's
wow.
That is absolutely incredible. And, of course, his famous one, Saturn, when he looked at Saturn's rings, his telescope obviously wasn't good enough to resolve them as rings. So he thought that they were two planets either side of Saturn. But then they disappeared because the rings were completely orientated towards Earth, like we talked about before, which actually helps you see the moons, but doesn't help you see the rings. And so he thought the planets had disappeared. So he put him into quite a state of confusion, that one.
It did. I'm not surprised. So he put forward a basic principle of relativity, that the laws of physics are the same in any system that is moving at a constant speed or in a straight line, regardless of its particular speed or direction. Hence, there is no absolute motion or absolute rest. This principle provided the basic framework for Newton's laws of motion, and is central to Einstein's theory of relativity. So, I mean, mad props we've got to give him.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible, isn't it? So Galileo himself said, imagine any particle projected along a horizontal plane without friction, then we know from what has been more fully explained in the preceding pages that this particle will move along this same plane with a motion which is uniform and perpetual, provided the plane has no limits. So that really is, Newton's laws of motion right there, the first law. Absolutely,
it's just
incredible.
so rad. Yeah. Matt, you know, I'm rock and roll through and through. So on my day off the other day, I started to go on YouTube and I did a deep dive on orbits. I was learning all about that. So this is nice to hear all this stuff.
Galileo's so cool that he's had lots of things named after him. What are they?
Well, the first spacecraft to enter orbit around Jupiter.
Tick.
Galileo Global Satellite Navigation System.
Tick.
The GAL, sometimes called Galileo, is a non-SI or even quasi-SI unit of acceleration, used extensively in the science of gravimetry.
I think it's gravimetry.
There we go.
Never heard of it. I've never heard it said out loud. Gravimetry.
There's a tough one.
The GAL. Yes, the GAL. It's an interesting unit of acceleration. Don't know why you need it, but yes, 1 centimetre per second squared. The GAL. And of course, there's the exoplanet 55 Cancri b, which was discovered in 1996 by Geoffrey Marcy and R. Paul Butler. But that was named officially Galileo on December 2015 after a competition to name it. And it is a very, very large Jupiter, warm Jupiter, hot Jupiter style planet, orbiting the star 55 Cancri A.
It's a beautiful thing. Love that. Hot Jupiter.
My favourite one is during the Apollo 15 mission in 1971, David Scott had a hammer and a feather on the moon's surface and dropped them to prove that acceleration is the same for all bodies subject to gravity on the moon, even for a hammer and a feather. And he said, "Look at that, Galileo was right." That's a very good little clip. If you've never seen it, I remember being shown that as a child in class on those televisions that the teachers hauled in on some massive
I love that.
trolley
huge
thing.
Trolley TV, the world's heaviest object.
Here's a really sad ending to the Galileo story.
Oh.
So after spending years in house arrest and not really being able to leave the house and writing his works up, right at the end he says, "Alas, your dear friend and servant Galileo has been for the last month hopelessly blind, so that this heaven, this earth, this universe, which I, by my marvellous discoveries and clear demonstrations, had enlarged 100,000 times beyond the belief of the wise men of bygone ages, henceforth for me is shrunk into such a small space as is filled by my own bodily sensations."
Oh, bless him.
So, touch of arrogance in there, but he I think he knew his place.
He was probably blind because he used to observe the sun for long stretches of time while looking at sunspots with his telescope. I mean, yeah.
Let that be a warning to you.
That'll do it.
So, Jamie, what's our spacecraft of the week?
Well, no surprises here, Matt. It's Galileo.
Good.
The NASA flagship spacecraft,
yeah.
There we go, to Jupiter. First spacecraft to orbit an outer planet. Launch date was October the 18th, 1989.
Space Shuttle Atlantis, STF-34, 5.3 metres tall. It managed to get to Jupiter on December the 8th, 1995. And then, just like Cassini recently was plunged into the atmosphere of Saturn.
R.I.P.
Yeah, Galileo was plunged into the atmosphere of Jupiter on September the 21st, 2003. One thing I had completely forgotten about was the Galileo probe, which separated from the spacecraft 5 months before it got to the planet and sort of travelled alongside but slightly ahead and actually went into Jupiter.
Oh.
And it went into Jupiter at, get this, 107,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's quick.
That's quick. And it was built by the Hughes Aircraft Company, as in Howard Hughes Aircraft Company.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And its major discoveries as it sort of sent its data back to the Galileo spacecraft, 57 minutes of data before it was completely crushed by the atmosphere of Jupiter. But it made some very surprising discoveries, like huge thunderstorms and the abundance of certain chemicals and things like that in the atmosphere of Jupiter.
Well, let's rattle through some of the milestones.
Yeah, let's do. Big milestones for Galileo. Go.
2.8 billion miles covered.
34 orbits of Jupiter in 8 years.
800 plus worked on the mission.
It made close passes by all the major moons.
It's allowed scientists to determine, among other things, that Jupiter's icy moon, and my favourite, Europa, probably has a subsurface ocean with more water than the total amount found on Earth. 2 to 3 times.
Yep. And of course, Io being highly volcanic, 100 times more volcanic than Earth.
And they found that the giant moon Ganymede possesses its own magnetic field, the first moon known to have a magnetic field.
And evidence that Ganymede and Callisto have liquid salt water layer as well.
Yeah, tick. First discovered the moon around an asteroid. Tiny Dactyl orbits the asteroid Ida.
That's back to that hill sphere thing. Ida's got a big enough hill sphere to have a little moon, Dactyl. And Jupiter's ring system is formed by dust kicking up. as interplanetary meteoroids smash into the planet's 4 small inner moons.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it was the first flyby and imaging of an asteroid, Gaspra, and then later, of course, Ida.
Well, Matt, it made the first and so far only direct observation of a comet colliding with a planet's atmosphere. Shoemaker-Levy 9.
Shoemaker-Levy 9. Do you know, I really remember this as a kid. It was a very, very exciting news story. Like really, really amazing. So yeah, such an amazing cosmic fluke that we were able to watch a comet literally be torn apart by Jupiter and then smash into Jupiter itself and see the impact, and all that just left these scars all over Jupiter that were way more visible than the Great Red Spot for months.
God, that is nuts.
Carl Sagan, Jamie,
yeah,
used Galileo to answer a question about whether you could actually see signs of life on another planet. So on Galileo's first Earth flyby, it looked at Earth and see if it could detect life on Earth, and indeed it did. So in a paper Carl Sagan wrote, yes, Galileo found Sagan's criteria for life, which was pretty exciting.
I think if you're mentioning in the same sentence Galileo and Sagan, I mean, that talk about heavyweights.
Yeah. So Jamie, we've got a David Baker chat, and guess what we're talking about?
What are you talking about?
We're talking about how Britain has just been kicked out of the Galileo global navigation system.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. Well, this is something that we've all been looking forward to. Should we roll the tape?
Well, before we roll, I just want to quickly say, since we talked, Airbus have come out and said that they're angry that the EU have forced UK to quit, saying that it's just a serious blow to the EU's common security and defence ambitions.
Well,
and even the former Prime Minister of Sweden has said it's strategic folly of the First Order.
Yeah.
So I would love to know what the listeners thought about, is this political theatre? Is it going to damage our relationship with ESA? What do you think about things that could happen after Brexit and building our own, partnering with other people? Anyway, shall we listen?
Brexit, what a shower of shit.
Anyway, shall we go straight to David?
Let's go straight in.
Let's roll the tape. Écoutez. David, how are you?
I'm absolutely fine, Matt, and good to be back with you again.
How's the weather down there?
It's awful, but then again, that's England, and it's the meteorological first day of winter as we speak right now, 1st of December, so I guess we should expect that.
That's a good point. So, what have you got on the, what recipes and what's on the menu today?
Top of the baking list really is to bring up to heat in discussion the astonishing news this morning as we speak, Matt, that the UK has pulled out or been expelled from the national security elements of the Galileo navigation system, and that on the resignation of the science minister because of his apparent claimed inability to continue in office based on a deal which has been struck by the May government with the EU, which absents us from the programme and maybe requires us to pay back compensatory contributions that we had pledged to continue, because listeners may recall that Galileo essentially is a long-term project that really originated 15 years ago, and it was the Blair government who did a huge amount to bring this forward and to get Galileo integrated into what was then a European Space Agency project. Not to get deflected too much, but it's important to remind ourselves that this was an ESA project, and so Britain, as depending on which year the budgets go, either third or fourth largest partner in the European Space Agency, had prime responsibility, and collectively we've paid in £1.5 billion to the project, and we've got £1.15 billion worth of work out of it. But over the years, and quite recently, as part of a package that the European Union has been trying to extract a lot of ESA projects and pull them under the control of the EU rather than the European Space Agency, which ESA has been very reluctant to offload any of these programs to the EU because they feel that they can transcend the political gameplays that go on between all member states within the EU, and that they wanted to keep it a clean deal with industry. But the EU finally secured possession of the Galileo project, so that has now come into these discussions. And it is apparent that while we the British, assuming Brexit goes ahead, imagining it in that situation where we're no longer part of the European Union, we would only have access to the broader non-coded aspects of the signal. Now, we were in a privileged position vis-a-vis Galileo to the present time until this bombshell arrived this morning, and Matt, of course, we're speaking here on the 1st of December, so things may change, but that's when we're talking. We had the privileged access for our military. So our military forces, in their navigation alignments with satellites they use, were able to use Galileo. That will no longer be possible, and so it will disrupt plans that the Ministry of Defence had to integrate our communications and navigation, integrated systems, both for ground, air, and sea position fixing using the coded military and national security frequencies, and really outside the military as well. This component of the signal also was for emergency coordination of first responders in case of national disaster, so we won't have access to that either. It should be said in the context of this, we never did have access anyway to the GPS coded signal, which only the US military have access to, so this was getting us into a much more Euro-based, pan-European, all singing, all dancing navigation infrastructure. Of course, Britain has been very, very involved in the hardware side of Galileo, and of course it was SSTL, Airbus now, has been involved with the manufacture of the prototype satellite. So this country has punched way above its weight and has got back out of it work equal to almost the amount that we have paid in. But these things ebb and flow. We could have surged to get back more slightly, versus the slightly less than we've got now. So it's a really, really serious situation. And there's one other concern as well, which is the fact that apparently, and this has only emerged because of the resignation of the Minister for Science, that we had already been planning, and I know this has been out in the media quite extensively, already we'd put aside £92 million, apparently, nice to know after the fact, that was there for funded studies on how to adapt our needs in the event that we didn't have access to Galileo. But I have to emphasize, the access to Galileo will be perfectly integrated for instance, cell phones, for car navigation systems, and general commercial civilian transport systems. Yeah, it's just the security, the emergency response teams, the defence areas we're being excluded from. And apparently now the May government is saying, oh yes, of course, we can build our own system. Well, you are looking at very large amounts of money. And I've seen a few semi-confidential quotes, so I won't talk about who's doing those, but the general figures are about in the region of £10 billion that we would have to put out in order to get an equivalent system for our military. But the real problem in this, which is the elephant in the room, is that it's all very well to say we can build it. Yes, we have the brains. Yes, we have the manufacturing capability. There's Airbus up at Stevenage. There's huge satellite manufacturing element within the pan-European framework. And Stevenage has recently got a contract for a big satellite deal out of ESA in the last few weeks. So while the EU is pulling work away from Britain as part of the price it has demanded for this deal, whatever the actual deal finally is agreed on, ESA itself is actually giving Britain more work, and as always is working right outside the constraints and the politicking of the European Union. But the real problem at Stevenage is that now, because there's such a heavy pan-European workforce there, a lot of Italians, a lot of French and Spanish and some Germans there, and there's work going on at Stevenage, which really is we can't really talk about it, but not because it's in the military sector, but there are things that are. Stevenage is taking over work that Europe hasn't got the capacity, or continental Europe has not got the capacity to do. And we won't go further into what projects those are, but there are some amazing things going on for which there just isn't the workforce in Europe. When we are outside the EU, that workforce won't be there. So there is not enough skilled labour in the UK indigenously. We won't be able to put in the effort that's needed to get a replacement for Galileo. So it's all very well for politicians to say, oh, yes, we can find the money. Yes, we'll build this. Look what we're doing now. It's wonderful stuff, space. It's all growth and expansion, and we've got this enormous surge forward. But you need people, and you need pragmatically to sit down and actually work out who is going to do the work. And at the moment, a very considerable amount of work that is already boosting the UK space industry is being done by European member states and their employees that come and work for Airbus and come over to the UK. They will go. They will not be there because they don't see their futures and their careers here. Even though there's something legally that might allow them to be able to stay, they don't want to because they see it as closing down, and therefore they're not career paths. The problem is, in many areas, there actually isn't work. For instance, in the Italian aerospace sector, there just is not the work for a lot of Italians that are working over here in our space industry here who can get a fast track into areas that they cannot get in their own country. So it's a deeper mess than really we're being led to believe by this, oh, it'll be all right on the night, oh, yes, it's fine, we've done the deal, yes, it's all very good. That's a politician speaking. That is not a pragmatic business manager.
No, but it seems to me it's back to that analogy of Brexit being like a tea bag coming out of a cup of tea and being chucked in the bin. It's like it's in neither party's interest, is it? I mean, because Europe completely kicking Britain out. Presumably, Britain's military expertise is a huge deal for Europe. It's they must be the biggest or one of the biggest military partners in the sort of European protection endeavours. Yes. And like you said, if we're employing lots and lots of European citizens in various science projects, etc., etc. So do you? I know obviously we've got May's deal and we have a kind of Brexit thing, but we've still got all those a year or 2 years to negotiate how we kind of get around those issues. But one point I wanted to ask about was that it was always touted that there'd been some kind of heavy-handed tactics from the British government where they'd actually sent people round to places like Airbus and said, oh, by the way, we might be kicked out of Galileo, so all the intellectual property that's British intellectual property you need to protect right now. Was there any truth to that?
I'm not really quotable on this, but I do know from what I hear that those moves have been made very definitely, and I think there has been far greater depth of penetration into embarrassing issues for the government that is already beginning, or has for a year or more, has begun to realize that industry and commerce and major businesses that are drivers in the UK economy really need to be given the advance notice that there is very much a 50-50 probability that we will be excluded from a lot of things. And I think evidence of that is that already and I know it's outside the space sector, but in the aircraft industry, which is pretty close to the space manufacturing base, it is an industry from which the space industry emerged. But already, while the French and the Germans are in a partnership deal to develop a successor to the F-35 Lightning, and this is no surprise, whenever you induct a new aircraft like the F-35, which is coming online as the RAF and the Royal Navy's major strike fighter, you start designing its successor because it takes that long. It takes 10 to 20 years. And so you immediately start work. Well, whereas the French and the Germans are going ahead with their next generation, which will be sixth generation air combat aircraft, the British have already signed a deal with Sweden to go cooperatively, and we are already signing deals as a country, I say we as a country, signing deals outside the European Union for cooperative joint ventures, which we've never done before in these fields. So on the positive side for the aerospace sector, we are seen as a prize bull tied up and really having to feed what's given us from other countries in order to sustain the infrastructure of our hugely successful aerospace capabilities.
Well, that was the other point I was going to make. If we're booted out of Galileo, could we turn round to, say, other partners who aren't in the Galileo system? And I'm assuming that includes Norway, maybe, Switzerland, Canada, India. Allies, could we not club together and create yet another GPS-style system with our allies and therefore create jobs and create commerce that way? Is that a feasibility?
Well, I think that is very much the case, and already manufacturing here has been approached. It's a very specific, dedicated sector in terms of satellites, quite apart from the aircraft industry, as you and our listeners are very well aware. But yes, there have been approaches made, and India is a very interesting point because it aspires, it has this huge enthusiasm, both cultural and political, in order to do well in space. And my goodness, it's punched above its weight, hasn't it? For what is a relatively small amount of money, they're achieving huge things indeed. And with China, with the Baidu system, their navigation system, you've essentially got four now. You've got the GPS on the Navstar satellites. You've got the Russian system, GLONASS. You've got the Baidu system, Baidu, from China, and India has already begun to develop its own navigation satellite system. Britain is that tied-up cow there, which can be used to milk opportunities through cooperation. How far and how fast this is developed needs a definitive decision on just what we do have access to and what we don't have access to within the European Union. And I do see, and it's not a reflection of my personal views on how it should go, which must remain agnostic, but there are potentials there if we can only get our act together, and the politicians will support an industry-to-industry development. We need to keep the politics out of this and the politicians head down on doing the administrative paperwork for the deals. But industry must lead this, and business must lead it. And through both wars and political discord between nations, it has always been business, and it has always been economic opportunities and industry that have built countries out of a morass and a malaise, or of an inadequacy through literally the erosion of its capability through conflict. Always. It's not the politicians doing deals. That's an infrastructure. So what we really need to do is to take the politics, and particularly partisan politics, right out of this equation and get very pragmatic, roll up our sleeves and get down to business. Because there are a lot of countries. India will never do business with China. They see themselves. This year, the population of India will exceed that of China.
Oh, wow.
And India sees itself on a roll.
Yeah.
They're nudging on 1.5 billion each.
That's pretty much the entire, it's half the globe, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is indeed. And so there are tremendous market opportunities, and the only restraint will be the disparity with regard to the cost of these things, because we have a way of life in Europe and in what's euphemistically almost called the Western world compared to the East, the wage structures, the payments, whether India could afford what it would cost for them to be a partner in a British system. But I think certainly there's opportunities there. But you can't just throw a switch and suddenly offload Galileo and immediately start the next morning with a UK central system. It's got to come through through negotiated deals with a lot of other countries.
That's big news. So really interesting to see how that one pans out.
Yeah.
Also, coming up, I suppose we should talk about the 50th anniversary of the big one, Apollo 8, coming up.
Yes, indeed, and there's been such a massive interest in this right across the board, and there's an unconstrained enthusiasm for the technical aspects, but very often because of course the victors write the history, the story you get from NASA isn't really the whole story. Not that they're lying about anything, but it's very much put out. And I think one point worth noting is, while it is a tremendous celebration, and while it was really a Christmas to remember 50 years ago, it was an extraordinary thing to experience and to be part of. At that time, I was part of the Mission Planning and Analysis Division, working trajectories and flight paths and also operations with regard to just what you could squeeze out of this mission. And it's very interesting. I often smile to myself when I read consistently that Apollo 8 was suddenly out of nowhere as an opportunity to get ahead because the lunar module was delayed. We'd had the first manned Apollo flight, which was Apollo 7 in the October, 68. And then the next one was to be Apollo 8 with a lunar module in a highly elliptical Earth orbit, testing out there. And then Apollo 9 was to have been essentially a repeat of 8 around the moon, maybe. But because lunar module was late, program planners inserted this circumlunar mission, which had no lunar module and was bold because it had no backup engine, such as was available with the descent engine when you took the lunar module with you. Even getting into lunar orbit, if something happened to that engine getting into lunar orbit, you still had a backup engine in the LEM descent stage. Of course, you divested yourself of that opportunity when the LEM went down to the surface, and still you just had the backup. But it was a bold move when you'd flown only one mission with a crew. But the origin of this going around the moon with a single command and service module, a single Apollo spacecraft, goes right back to 1964. And I can remember very, very much, this was a year after NASA inducted almost 200 U.S. Air Force officers to essentially put the program on track to achieve a moon landing by 69. Because under the old order up to September 63, there's no way NASA was going to make it, because they didn't have that military-style focus, discipline, and removal of extraneous activities that weren't really necessary to actually achieve the goal. So as part of that, the Air Force approached NASA and offered, at a time when our unmanned robots like Ranger and Surveyor were in terrible trouble and were not producing the results. Surveyor was hugely delayed and was still, in 64, 2 years away from its first flight. Ranger program was failure after failure after failure, and it was only on the 7th launch that it succeeded. So this was a parlous time for getting detailed information, and the engineers were pushing hard and saying, we need more detailed information on the surface characteristics. All we've got is telescopic observations. Nothing else. And it's difficult now to recall that the best images we had of the surface were those from telescopes on Earth until the mid-1960s, several years after the development of the lunar module began. So there was huge pressure. And NASA struck a deal with the Air Force and the National Reconnaissance Office to declassify aerial reconnaissance cameras that had been built by Kodak and the Kodak Biomat system for use in the aerial reconnaissance platforms that were used in spy planes. And so that system was transferred for use in a project that began in 1964, quite late, Lunar Orbiter. And that turned out 2 and 3 years later on a fast track because it took a camera system already developed as a spy camera for the US Air Force. And right at this same time, the Air Force said, would you like a pucker full-up spy satellite, the K-87, to put on the nose of Apollo, take Apollo to moon orbit and do very high-resolution imaging of the surface, which, without an atmosphere and down around an altitude of only about 70 kilometers, you will be able to get a resolution down to about 10 centimeters on the surface. Fantastic, said NASA. And so plans went ahead long before any landings were considered, to fly Apollo missions in moon orbit to do a photo reconnaissance. Fast forward 4 years, suddenly we realized, and I can remember the birth of this in early 68, before even the first manned Apollo flight. Let's push on and use an Apollo for a big photo reconnaissance mission first. And then it was morphed over into using Apollo 8 with essentially good handheld cameras to do photo reconnaissance over the landing sites. By which time, of course, lunar orbiter had come good. And with the spy satellite cameras used in the NASA lunar orbiter from the National Reconnaissance Office, it came good. And in 1967, in fact, the US Air Force pulled out of that and said, well, your lunar orbiter is doing fine, so look, we'll cancel the deal with regard to putting a K-87 on the nose of Apollo on the docking ring. So instead of a lunar module, you'd have this huge spy satellite in front and do essentially a ground track alignment so that you kept it pointing down toward the surface as it went around the moon, taking all these very high-resolution images. So really, Apollo 8, as it flew, was pulled off the shelf and came out of a project that had its origins 4 years earlier.
Yeah. So it's not quite, yeah, so like you said, it's not quite as rushed as everyone said it was. Interestingly, we've got a KH-12 launching probably on the day that this podcast comes out, on a Delta IV Heavy.
Yes, indeed.
So
it's just, but you read the NASA histories, they don't like to make any reference to. You don't even find serious description and discussion of all those 200 U.S. Air Force officers, and obviously they all turned up in civvies and didn't wear the uniforms. But it was General this and Lieutenant Colonel that, and they moved into all of the key positions at NASA. And it was only essentially the Manned Spacecraft Center, the Marshall Space Flight Center, that really remained immune from that. And under Kurt Debus, who was director of the Kennedy Space Center, you had a whole raft of U.S. Air Force officers who brought the systems engineering approach, which is a particular management tool that was used in the development of the ICBMs, in particular the Polaris missile system. And that's where they brought the PERT program in, Program Evaluation Review Technique, PERT, which was the program model that had fast-tracked both Polaris and Minuteman, which was the land-based missile, and that management team was transferred over, who had been schooled by General Bernard Shriver, who was head of the U.S. Air Force ballistic missile programs, and of course that whole flotilla of specialists moved in to NASA, and the phase shift in NASA from calendar 1964 was phenomenal. And to be there at the time, I can remember it was literally like moving into a whole different way of doing business. And that's how we got on the moon, with that kind of approach and with those kind of people in charge. And it was a brilliant, high-level decision by Jim Webb to allow these people to come in and bring all the backup possibilities and support, because they could get access to these spy cameras and this spy equipment. And in fact, the J-series missions of 15, 16, and 17 were given access to the mapping camera, which came directly from ITEC, right out of the spy satellite program.
Yeah, well, we often talk about the engineers and the astronauts, et cetera, but I guess the management teams around NASA and actually it's something I've noticed when I've interviewed people from ESA and places like that. Their career paths, if they're to go higher up in the organisations, they go from essentially engineers into managers, and I'm always fascinated by that. Transition, because it almost feels unnatural for an engineer to become a manager. I don't know why.
Well, you've put your finger right on the very thing that happened within the Apollo program. So many people, if they did good work, tapped on the shoulder, right, you're in charge of this department now from tomorrow. And there was a and a turnaround, and they'd never thought of themselves as that. But they'd shown flexibility of thinking, creativity, the hand up when asking for volunteers, that is the way that you demonstrate your ability to put your back behind a project rather than your own personal interest in the detail that you're specifically assigned to. And you could see this palpably within the companies as well as within the NASA infrastructure.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. I need to look further into that into that whole transition. It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
You did actually mention earlier on, of course, you've got this influx of military personnel. Before we came on air, you said something really interesting about the wage structures of the civilians and the military personnel.
Yes, that's right. Most of the astronauts came out of the military, and initially, I think there was some empathy with a lot of the guys who essentially were spawning off of these astronauts, the media, and of course Time Life realized that these guys were not paid anything more than their military pay, and they just got flying pay for their missions, nothing else. These guys, and you talk to, well, I can remember back to a lot of the Apollo astronauts who had a hard time clothing themselves with the type of clothing that was worn for the functions they were asked to go to. There was no budget for uniform, a uniform budget. You didn't get a tax rebate if you were able, to go out and buy clothes for a particular function because of the job you were doing. And a lot of the wives in particular felt really sidelined in that they all of a sudden required to go to presidential balls, or the governor of a state would invite them to this great function. And perhaps the ladies are more consciously aware of their appearance and how they wish to be seen by other people, and that's quite natural. We all feel we're shaped by the way we clothe ourselves to a certain extent, and I think that's perfectly natural. But they were being catapulted into situations where they just, they came essentially from hometown America, and they came from Midwestern states. They came where none of these guys even had a suit half the time. And they were in the military doing a job, and because of the momentum of the program, propelled to extraordinary heights. And then when the civilian astronauts came in, they came from test pilots. And Neil Armstrong, right off the top of my head, I cannot recall the figure, but he was paid an amount which was about twice what the military pilots were able to command. And while we have been talking, I have just dug up from my files, as I look at my screen here, the actual salaries that were paid to the Apollo 11 astronauts in the year that they flew to the moon. Now, Neil Armstrong was on pay grade GS-16 Step 7, and he earned $30,054 per annum in the year he went to the moon.
Well, that's good wages.
$30,000.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Collins earned, or actually his salary with his annual pay and allowances of an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, and with his time in the service, he earned $17,147.36. And Buzz Aldrin, as I turn the page, got just over $18,000. So pretty much near twice the amount that Armstrong got. Not because he was the commander. It was totally irrelevant who was in the job slot. This was for a position. So essentially, because Neil Armstrong was an NACA test pilot on the X-15, he was in a civilian pay grade structure and was not part of the military pay grade. And it's always been the case that the actual monthly paycheck of anybody in any armed service in the developed world anywhere gets a fraction of what they could get as a pilot in civilian life. But the military have such an infrastructure of support with housing and with everything else that it's compensatory. But in actual salary terms, the civilians got nearly twice, the civilian astronauts got nearly twice what the military guys did. And that was never a bone of contention because they were all in it together and pay grades didn't come into it. But it emphasizes the fact that on those kind of pay grades. And this is when the dollar to the pound was 4-1, 4 or 5-1. So you are looking at a salary there which is really incapable of supporting the kind of lifestyle they were propelled into. And again, it just opens up the reality of the phrase that NASA prepares these guys to go to the moon. It never prepared them to come back home, because what they faced, both the lifestyle that many of them did not like, did not want, propelled into the limelight, into publicity, having to appear constantly, is something astronauts balk at today. Poor old Tim Peake, I don't know how he keeps smiling, because guys like that are, inside, that's the last thing in the world they want to be, is puppets on a propaganda string, which is essentially what astronauts become because of their great achievements. The public want to see them. They want to hear them. They want to know that they're inspirational. You've got to have it that way. But the kind of person who becomes an astronaut is not the kind of person who likes to stand up and come on stage, dressed to impress. That's just not what they are as people. They roll their sleeves up and get on with a job. And because it's so unique, it is pursued by the public, who demand their attention. And we need them to inspire, because although these, it's been said so many times, they stand on the shoulders of giants, etc. But in fact, they themselves are so aware that the people who actually give them these opportunities, that provide the vehicles for them to achieve these great things, are hidden almost behind an opaque window of work in developing in engineering science all the capabilities that they work with. So in many ways, it's a lose-lose situation for a lot of these guys, because once they get beyond that point, the first step is to be chosen as an astronaut, then it's reasonably normal life, and then you make a flight, and that's it. Your life is controlled and is never your own again.
Hats off to Tim Peake. He always comes across as just the most consummate professional ever.
Yes.
He's just what a fantastic person.
Indeed.
Before you go, is there what's coming up in this month's spaceflight? I must admit, I very much enjoyed last month's spaceflight. It was a really enjoyable. There were so many great articles in there. I did find myself screaming at one of them a little bit, but
well, we've got coverage of the International Astronautical Congress in Bremen. We've got the extraordinary, wonderful success of the British Interplanetary Society with RightSpace, and we've also got an analysis I've got maps of the first two Space Launch System Orion flights, Exploration Mission 1, Exploration Mission 2, with detailed charts which show every step of the trajectory, what's going to happen on each of those two flights. So that's something to watch for, and a whole smattering of news.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait for it to land on my new doorstep.
And good luck with that, Matt.
Thanks. Okay. Cheerio, David. Thanks very much for taking the time out, as always.
Thanks, Matt. Bye for now.
Oh, incredible once again. Thank you, David, as always.
Jamie, I've got a couple of space facts for you, and then we must go.
Hit me.
If the Earth was the size of a tennis ball, Galileo, the spacecraft, would have travelled about 15 miles. Yeah, and so New Horizons, which is on its way to Ultima Thule, 21 miles that would have travelled, or in reality, 4.1 billion miles.
Ouch.
I went a bit crazy with these because I've got a new spreadsheet where I've worked out I can put in anything and it tells me. I love a spreadsheet, and it tells me things. So if Neil Armstrong's trip to the moon was 1 mile, Galileo has travelled 12,000 miles.
Well, Matt, I'm going to leave you with one that's going to make your ears bleed. Are you ready?
Yeah, go on then.
If the Earth was the size of the smallest bacteria, then Proxima would still be 1 kilometre away. How'd you like them apples?
Well,
How'd you like them Proximas?
I mean, think about it, Jamie. Just think about something a kilometre away and then a bacteria, and that's how far we got to go.
Just to Proxima. Let alone another bubble universe that I'm definitely going to visit when I'm older, Matt. When I'm grown up.
Bubble time.
Oh, Christ.
So out of all of those, I think my favourite is Earth being smaller than a golf ball, with Voyager being 15 times smaller than a bacteria, travelling 35 miles away from it.
It's just
How
insane.
insane. How brilliant are humans to be able to have done that?
We're pretty good. So, Matt, if I'm a fan of this show and I'm new to it, what can I do?
You can go to iTunes, press subscribe, and give us a 5-star review.
Tick.
That's the first thing, Jamie. And then nip over to Patreon and or nip over to our website, www.interplanetary.org.uk. Have a little wander around there, maybe buy yourself some merch, and maybe nip over to Patreon where you can donate if you can, and don't feel pressured into
Don't
this.
feel pressured. I tell you what, though, Matt.
But we absolutely love our patrons.
We love our patrons. Hey, Matt, you mentioned our merch. Mm-hmm. Would any of them make good stocking fillers for Christmas?
Oh, man, would they? I would love to wake up to a rocket equation iPhone case.
And I think that the best present you can give your parents is an Interplanetary podcast mug they can have
Definitely.
a nice hot cup of tea on Christmas morning out of.
Yeah, the Interplanetary podcast mug, I think, is the jewel in the crown.
It's huge. Everyone wants one. Well, it's been emotional, and, go and look up in the sky and think of our mate, Galileo.
Look up right now, because Orion is spectacular in the evenings at the moment.
It is. All right, guys.
Bye-bye,
We love
Spotcats.
you. See you next week.